if you happen across any of that sexy Japanese hentai, maybe you could pick up a couple issues. Or some DVDs.
You know there's an internet, right?
Yeah, but it only holds so much.
Holy cow, Bill. A bit into the hobby, aren't you? I am Reasonable Rex, the T-Rex you can trust. And today we're going over Season 15, Episode 4 of King of the Hill. This episode is a fantastic showing of the original idea, the original through line of Hank and Bobby having trouble connecting, brought forward to a modern setting. And this episode does a fairly good job of almost taking my favorite and best episode of this season, but it still doesn't beat the second episode. Remember to like this video if you like it and subscribe if you want to see more. That really helps me, that really pushes me to keep making these. Anyway, let's go ahead and get started. The episode setup is quite simple. It starts with Bobby trying to park a food truck down the alleyway where the guys stand, and he cannot do it. You know, Hank is muttering some encouragement, and the guys are kind of laughing. Once he finally gets it there with Hank's help, he reveals that, hey, there's a sci-fi convention, and he wants to run a food truck there. He figures with Emilio running the brick and mortar location, and him at the sci-fi convention, he can open up his business to new customers and make double the money. You know what? That's pretty clever, Bobby. I see your internship at Strickland Propane paid off. Of course, since he's having trouble with the truck, he decides to invite Hank along. And Hank doesn't even really know what sci-fi is. Dale has to explain it to him. Which, of course, he knows what it is, as he's the alien expert. We then cut over to Minh, who is making her way over to the Hill House because Khan took her slow cooker in the divorce, and she has no way of making soup, I guess, because she talks about him throwing soup parties. Peggy's going through her old Peggy's Musing columns that she used to have printed in the newspaper. Now, Peggy started her musings all the way back in Season 3, if you can believe it. And that's actually the episode where she first started doing this, is where she found out that John Redcorn and Nancy were, you know, making the beast with two backs behind Dell's back. Hopefully that is a plot point that they have dropped and moved on from, because I do not enjoy it. Anyway, we get a look into her brilliant poetic mind, and well...
The difference between summer and winter is what you are wearing?
Oh my goodness, Peggy. Your words, they have such depth. But the reason she's looking through these is the community college is having a class on poetry, and it's going to have this famous published poet there. And she wants to, you know, learn under her, so she's going to submit a few and show up to the class and, I guess, try to get published, because as we know, Peggy sees herself as the main character. After the introduction of the B-plot with Peggy and Minh, we cut to the convention where Bobby tries to set up his truck. Unfortunately, he seems to be a little bit late, so he doesn't exactly get the best position that he can to set up his truck. It's away from the entrance, no one's really going to see it. Bobby then reveals that he also has a costume for the sci-fi convention, something that Hank is already kind of scoffed at seeing a few people pass by. Of course, Hank would never like sci-fi, that's just kind of how he is. He would see it as weird and strange. He's more of the outdoorsy and woodworking kind of guy. However, this ties back to Bobby, you know, being an imaginative kid. We saw he got really invested in fantasy and other things of the sort. And Hank has been known to get into a hobby if he gets it a chance. I mean, look at him when he got into video gaming. We then cut to the class and oh my god, there's Minh. Turns out that she wanted to apply for this class too because she figured that if Peggy could do it, she could do it. And I love these two's dynamic. Peggy is someone who sees herself as the main character. Always right, always smart, she knows what to do, she's the best at everything. And Minh looks down on everybody. She'll put down Peggy, and it's interesting to see them work together. Someone who thinks so highly of himself and someone who thinks so lowly of everyone else. The teacher gets introduced and she waxes poetic, literally. And we get an introduction to the class and we see there's a little bit of a rivalry starting to build between Minh and Peggy. Due to Bobby's poor timing and poor spot, he's not getting any foot traffic. And so Hank offers to go and sort of drum up business for him. Because I mean, Bobby has to stay behind the grill. Hank doesn't know how to cook these types of food. Especially if they're using charcoal in that truck. Can you use charcoal in a food truck? Holy crap, you can use charcoal in a food truck. That's insane. And so Hank does his best to go out and sort of drum up some business. Unfortunately, this is a setting that A, he's not comfortable in, and B, he doesn't understand. So if anything, he comes off as socially awkward, as someone that nobody really wants to interact with. I mean, this is a place where everyone's dressed up as their favorite characters, and he's a person. We return back to the class still in session, and we see that Min's poems are too aggressive. Her anger for Con is feeding her, and it's coming out in her poems, while Peggy's poems are just too light, there's no substance. When they kind of argue with each other and bounce off one another, that's when the grand teacher gets the idea of, hey, you two should work together. With their unlikely union formed, we cut back to the convention where Hank, holy crap, is that someone dressed up as Monsieur Martinez, the pastor with a very big kill streak, in a wedding dress? We've seen him dress up as a bride before in one of the episodes they watched of his show way back in the original seasons. Nice to see someone's got some attention to detail. Hank is doing his best, trying to hand out flyers, but nothing's working, where he sees someone that he believes to be a security guard. Because he thinks this is a normal person who is being paid to work the convention, he reveals his true thoughts, calling everyone around them weird and freaks. But for the security guard, well, he's not a security guard. He's actually dressed up as someone from like a galactic police or a galactic soldier. He just hasn't put his mask on. And so, being insulted and seeing Hank insult the entire fandom while wearing a pass that Bobby gave him that gives him access to everything, the guy decides to con him and get the pass, telling him that it actually won't give him access to where he needs to go. He needs a diamond pass and that he'll go trade it out for him, and then steals the pass and uses it for himself. Hank only realizing this when he puts his mask back on. However, the guy at the door won't let Hank in. We return to Peggy and Minh, who are now working together, trying to collaborate at Peggy's home. And there's an interesting detail I want to point out here. Peggy, of course being selfish and not the biggest fan of Minh, pours her a little bit less lemonade than she pours herself. I see what you did there, Peggy. You didn't escape me. Their collaboration begins to work because Peggy says she looks for life to inspire her. Minh sees Con walking down the street and it inspires her through her anger with him, and their first poem is complete. We now return back to the convention where Hank has to go and report what happened to Bobby. Hank discovers that that pass cost $300, extremely expensive. Bobby is bleeding money. The truck that he rented isn't turning any profit because no one is seeing it where he's parked. No one's coming in from the convention because Hank is no longer able to hand out flyers, which he was doing terribly anyway, and the pass he paid for the weekend is now gone. Bobby decides that he's gonna go get it back and tells Hank to not speak because Bobby is a member of this community. He understands all the different shows and everything being represented here, and he'll be able to communicate with everybody. Now we return to Peggy and Minh, who are back at the poetry workshop. Did the teacher send them home to write a poem together to be like, hey, take some time, let me see what you're working with. I can think something really good can come from your teamwork. I guess that makes sense. I could see that happening. So they start delivering their poems that they've formed together. It makes an impact and everyone's impressed. So much so that the teacher, this visiting guest poet, says, I could actually use you two in my magazine that I publish. Peggy's excited. She says, thanks to me, you're going to get published because, of course, in her mind, she's the one who did all the work. That's just how Peggy is. However, Minh is flirting with the gentleman behind her, getting his phone number. Returning to the convention, Bobby uses his knowledge of the fandom to convince the guard that they belong here and they were robbed of their badge. Does this work? Like, if I showed up to a Star Wars convention and the security guard's like, hey, you can't come in, you don't have a pass, and I pretend to do a Jedi mind trick, and I'm like, actually, this guy stole our pass. Will you please help us get it? Would he be like, yeah, I understand? Or would he be like, dude, get out of here? I think it's probably the latter. But it works here. And now we cut back to the Hill House. I guess class is out of session. I guess it's finished for the day. They went to the class, got told to work together, went to Peggy's home, wrote poems together, went back to the class, delivered their poems, and now they're back at Peggy's home writing more poems? Is these the ones they want to get published, I guess? Due to Minh being so excited about her new man friend and setting up a date near immediately, she's lost all that anger that Con inspired inside of her, meaning that they're no longer the dynamic duo that'll get published, which Peggy cannot stand for. Also, she drops the best line in this episode.
Do not lose your inner bitch.
Oh, Peggy, you are seriously one of the people that make this show so funny. You're not on Joseph's level, but you're still pretty funny. With Minh being so happy, They cannot finish any poems, and Peggy's unable to write one on her own, but she gets struck with an idea. It turns out Con is actually throwing a soup party. I don't know what that really entails, and I wonder if Con's actually secretly an amazing cook. All the alley boys are excited to be part of this party until Peggy crashes it. Peggy pretends to accidentally drop that Min's going on a date and where she'll be at because she knows that Con will get upset and go after her. Back at the convention, we see Hank, Bobby, and that security guard looking for the guy who stole Hank's pass, and eventually they bump into him. Hank is of course consumed by anger because his response to whenever someone wrongs him is to kick their ass, which is not something you can do in public. Bobby tries to start a conversation, but it ends up going south when Hank gets pulled into it. I don't really like how Hank is portrayed here. Let me get one thing correct. Hank doesn't like this area and he does think everyone's weird. That is fine, that is set in stone. But Hank doesn't strike me as the kind of person to create such a huge scene. He doesn't like attention being brought on to him when he's doing anything that he doesn't think is worth noticing. He's not being a champion here, he's being the villain of the moment. Either way, during his confrontation with this man calls out how he insulted everyone here. He's getting recorded from every angle because that's what happens when things go down. You know, people either want a viral moment or evidence in case something bad happens. And Hank continues to insult everyone there, which is a horrible look. And to make it even worse, he insults this guy for not having a family. And when he proves that not only does he have a family, but they're actually there with him, Hank drops this line.
Break the cycle of abuse here.
Dad!
What? There's still hope for them.
I cannot imagine Hank saying something like this. I could understand him saying something like, oh, you're forcing them to do this? They should be outside playing. And then the guy could have been like, oh, actually they enjoy it. And Hank would be like, oh, there's no way. This is just way too aggro for how I believe Hank would act these days. I could be wrong. I'm not a professional writer, but it's how I see it. They get booed and shamed out of the convention. And Bobby abandons Hank. He says, I'm never going to sell anything as long as they see you here. Just go home. Peggy is waiting expectantly for Min's horrible date to end and for her to come back to her house. I don't know why Min would immediately make her way to Peggy's house, but she does. And she starts going off about how bad her date went, while Peggy's immediately trying to prod her with poetic prompts. Peggy lets it slip about, hey, how did it feel when Con got into the restaurant? And Min's like, I never said he did. And she understands what happened. And Peggy tries to use Min's anger at her to continue writing the poems. Min goes off on her, calls her out for what she did. And Peggy's only defense is, I'm gonna be published. More selfishness from Peggy. She even says that she doesn't have a dark side, to which Min aptly responds.
Yeah? Well, someone who could do what you did is way darker than I could ever be.
I love this. Peggy is a funny character. She is funny because she has such a huge ego. Her self-assurance is so strong that you cannot tell her she is wrong. There's been times she's been given active evidence that she is wrong and she's chosen to ignore it. Like when she mistranslated the Spanish in the show from the last season, Hank points out the subtitles say something different and she says, wow, that's crazy that they got the subtitles wrong. When she actually gets called out and has to face genuine backlash for the things she's done or said, it's just a great moment because our character's not used to it. And we get to see how she reacts. She's starting to understand how terrible the thing she did really is, but she's not completely there yet. We get a little moment between the guys in the alleyway, and normally I wouldn't even really talk about this, except for Bill. Bill points out that the people at the SCI-FI convention are in a lot of ways like them going to a sports game, like a football game, you know, something along that line. And Hank tries to argue that they're not dressing up to pretend to be athletes or anything like that, but Bill's words strike a chord with him, and I adore this. Bill is often the butt of many jokes. He's made pathetic and sad because that's what I guess is funny. I never really found it that funny. I prefer to see Bill happy, but it's how his life has been written. But that doesn't make him dumb, even though they make him say and do stupid things. Bill actually has a lot of wisdom. When he usually delivers it, people ignore him. Even here, Bill says,
I'm sorry. I'll stop making sense now.
which is kind of sad. I really hope by the end of this season his life is improving at least a little bit. Back in the class, Peggy delivers an actually elegant poem that was created through what she did to Min, and everyone loves it. and she is eating up all the applause and all the love she's getting for it, but she can't help but notice Min's empty seat. And there it is, the guilt of what she did starting to eat away at her. Peggy's feeling that backlash, and it's so great to see her character experience this. Now we get to see Hank doing something he doesn't do that often. He's exposing himself to other people's interests and hobbies. We've seen that when Hank does this in the past, he can find that he enjoys things that he otherwise thought he would not. When he played the video game based on him, he could not stop playing it. When Bobby was growing roses secretly and he found out it was competitive, well, he got into it. And so with Bill's words ringing in his head, he goes to watch the entire show that guy was dressed up as from, or movies, I'm not quite sure what it is. And by the end of it, Hank loves it. This to me makes a lot of sense. Hank is a Texan at heart, and I assume that a lot of Texans love Westerns, because the Wild West was sort of born and forged in Texas and the surrounding areas. Westerns and sci-fi are sort of a brother and sister genre in a lot of ways. You'll see a lot of themes repeated on both sides. In fact, Star Wars, which I would argue is the most widespread of the sci-fi genre, don't get me wrong, I love other ones much better. I am a huge Warhammer 40k fan, but you know, you can take Star Wars and show it to somebody who is 80 and they're going to know what it is over Warhammer. Star Wars is a mix of Western, sci-fi, and samurai. Three genres blended perfectly together. So of course Hank's going to see the things he loves in Westerns represented here, and he sees something near the end of the show that gives him an idea. Hank approaches Bobby, who is now himself trying to hand out flyers. Bobby of course wants him nowhere near him, and the guy who stole his pass bumps into him, and Hank uses what little bit of knowledge he has from the show after watching all of it, I keep saying show, it could be a movie, to start a dialogue with him. And he reveals that he has handcrafted a perfect replica of the axe from the end of the movie. And that's when it clicked in my head. I never thought I could see Hank enjoying something from sci-fi. It just doesn't seem like his kind of thing. But cosplayers work extremely hard to craft their costumes and their props. I'm friends with cosplayers who work very hard. A lot of the things they make are handmade, and it takes a lot of work and a long amount of time to craft it. And Hank is a handyman at heart. He loves building things. He also has that near autistic attention to detail, where he will put the blaster marks where they need to be because he saw it in one scene. He will put the runes in correctly because that's how it was in the movie or show, whatever it is. And so he presents this perfectly crafted prop, earning the admiration and respect of those around him, so much so that the guy gives over his pass. Now I feel like this is a sort of sped up conclusion to sort of reach the end. Obviously he wouldn't just hand it over after seeing a really cool prop. I kind of thought he was going to give it to this guy, and maybe it's implied he did after the end of this episode. One more note, Bobby once again shows all that salesman acumen he picked up by telling people they can take pictures with this amazing prop and they can get a discount on his food as long as they tag his restaurant and share the pictures on social media. Clever boy there, Bobby. We then get the end of the episode where Peggy shows off that she and Minh have been published in that poet's magazine. She shows it to Minh, and Min's like, well, don't you owe me something else? Peggy actually delivers a heart-filled apology. That is very rare coming from her. That is almost as valuable as gold. But Minh would rather have the gold. She wants the amount of money, or at least half the amount of money they were paid for getting published, which Peggy reveals was only 20 bucks. So she's going to give her 10, to which Khan in the alleyway walking by yells out that half that $10 is his. You know, seeing that through line of Hank not understanding Bobby's interest being brought to the future and still being tested out and shown in different ways is so interesting. Before, Hank would usually be the stopgap on what Bobby could enjoy because he was the adult and Bobby was a kid. He couldn't buy things on his own usually. Now, Bobby is a successful business owner. He can buy whatever he wants. He can get interested in whatever he wants. And there's going to be times that Hank interacts with Bobby and has to deal with these things. And seeing Hank being willing to open himself up and try out these things, oh man, that is amazing. Of course, seeing Peggy be the leader of a B-plot is usually very funny. It was here. And seeing her actually get a bit of a comeuppance and sort of feeling guilt, suffering for the things that she did, something that doesn't usually happen to her because her ego won't allow it, well, that's just the icing on the cake. What did you think about this episode? Did you like seeing Hank start to love sci-fi, or do you think it's ridiculous that he would ever find that as a hobby? Do you think that Peggy got the rightful amount of punishment for her actions, or do you think that she could have been scolded a little bit more? Let me know in the comments down below. And until next time, bye!